Thanks for joining me again. In the first video that I made to kind of introduce the site and its purpose, I talked about three primary reasons or pillars of why I decided this year to run for the board. Now, the first of those pillars is what we're going to talk about in this video segment. I call it New Yeast. And New Yeast to me is a focus on how we communicate and conduct business here at Hilltop Lakes as an association and really as a community. And make no mistake about it, okay, this starts with board of director leadership. Now, I had to think long and hard on this one because leadership is really hard to communicate, in my opinion. It's because if you really think about it, the average person doesn't deal with a whole lot of leadership in a practical sense in their life. I mean, you may go to work and you may be a manager or you may work for a manager, but managing and leadership or leading are two different things. And most companies really don't give you a taste of leadership. They give you a taste of management. And even if you take a look at politics, you can take a look at politicians and you may look at one and say, you know what, that guy's a real leader. And you may look at another one and say, you know what, that guy's a goofball. He's nothing of a leader. But do we really ever take the time to say, okay, why is this guy a really good leader and why is that guy not? I mean, the average, I don't sit around thinking about that stuff every day, and neither does most other people. So the best way, I think, is kind of to tell you a story or analogy that helps me unfold where I'm going with this number one principle based on leadership. And I'm going to use a story that is a true story. And some of you are aware that I'm a 24-year combat arms veteran of the U.S. Army. And I've worn just about every hat that you can wear in the U.S. Army. I've worn the stripes of a private. I've worn the stripes of a sergeant, an NCO, and I've worn the brass of a U.S. Army officer. And the biggest formative point in my entire military career, and honestly, it's shaped my business, what I've done in business, happened at the very start of my time in the Army. I was at that time PFC Hartmann, and I was made the RTO, radio telegraph operator, for my infantry company commander. Now, being an RTO means you're by his side, always. You go to the briefings by his superiors. You're there at the briefings to his lieutenants, his people that work for him. You see how he communicates. You see how he acts. Everything. And my first year and a half in that infantry company, I had a company commander. His name, well, I'm not skip his name, but you know what? He was very self-interested, very focused on his career, and his progression up the food chain. And he micromanaged. He micromanaged our infantry company, and I'll tell you, it was very corrosive. I mean, that company did not perform well. I would say we were the armpit of our battalion, and I promise you, we would have stunk in a lot of bigger areas as well. But it was what it was. I saw what micromanagement does, and I saw what that type of self-focused interest does. And about a year and a half through the tour, we got a brand new command team in. This was a first sergeant and a company commander. The first sergeant was the finest NCO I still to this day ever had the pleasure of serving with, Jimmy Acuna. And the company commander is one of the finest officers that I ever worked with, and that was Captain Carl Monger. That command team came in, and I'll tell you, it was a day and night difference. The way that the two of them as a command team communicated, the way that they conducted their business, and the focal point of why they conducted their business, I think is another reason, was astounding. They definitely, as military officers, right, they were both absolutely focused like a laser on who they were responsible for. So when it came to that company, their job was to make us the most effective and combat-ready infantry company, so if we ever went to war, we had the highest chance of accomplishing our mission and doing it without costing unnecessary lives. That's how mission-focused they were. The way they communicated, the way they conducted their business was all about that. And I'll tell you, in 6 months, tops. That infantry company that was at the armpit of the unit, of the battalion, okay, in 6 months, nobody could touch us. We were so doggone good at what we did. That's what dynamic, on-focus leadership can do for any organization. Now, obviously you may be saying, well, that's a great story, right? And I'm glad, you experienced that and whatnot, but, we're not a military unit. We're not going to war. Okay, well, yeah, you're right, okay, but there's core fundamental principles there that absolutely apply to anything and everything. So, I'm going to give you an example that maybe is a bit more relevant in how we apply that. Well, I'm going to talk about something that I've noticed over the 12 years that I've lived here, and that is there's really, within our community of neighbors and whatnot, we have two mindsets that are prevailing. There is a mindset that is very focused towards the golf course, and what is good for the golf course is good for everybody, and everybody needs to realize that. And so when it comes to managing our resources, the golf course generally trumps all, is first place, and everything else a distant second. And if we need to trim away some amenities and whatnot, so be it. We need to make sure that the golf course is taken care of. All right, now there's a second mindset, and that is one to where people feel, right, that we need to stick a little closer to the general model and spirit of how Hilltop Lakes was developed, that being kind of a resort community, and that we need various amenities, and those various amenities allow us to do better commercially, economically, and whatnot, has the most hope for the future. Okay, so I can tell you, I've seen this, right? This isn't modern day folklore. I really think there's a there. The funny thing is, though, is that that if the underlying issues that both mindsets kind of come together at, if those underlying issues are properly unpacked, okay, I think what you will find is there is commonality here to where those two mindsets can come together. Those two mindsets can come together in our community, and we can accomplish great things as a community together with with authentic, focus moving forward, right, together. And if we try to do it as split factions, it will not work. It's a nice thought, but I'm sorry, it just generally does not work. So the question is, if it's really obvious to me, and maybe that's obvious to you, these two different competing mindsets, how come nobody has really taken the initiative to address it? Where's the leadership been to really say, oh, hold on a second, you know what? This really is a strong current within our community, and it can be fixed. And it can be fixed in a great way that really helps the community. So let's do it. Let's get that knocked out and really unpack these issues, which I think can create great unity within our community, which is one of the key ingredients we need to do really well as a community moving forward. So, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the election, and where we are right now, you need to expect more from the Board of Directors. We need to expect more from the Board of Directors and our association as a community, right? And the Board of Directors needs to deliver more. We've got to raise our expectations. I could do a sports analogy. It's kind of like Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher, right? I'm an Aggie, can't help it. Okay, the biggest change that you've seen at A&M and their football program comes to do with expectations and what's acceptable and what's desired, right? And Jimbo Fisher, he's all business. He's about accomplishing great things. We need to get along the business, accomplishing great things. But if you don't even set your sights on great things, you will never get there. That's my football A&M analogy, free of charge. This time is, it's not a time of personal agendas, okay? That time is over. This is a time of community agenda. That's what this time is about. Okay, remember when we were talking about Sears? Okay, Sears had a certain window of time to make the correct business decisions, which either was going to lay the path forward for great success and continued prosperity, or it was going to set the course that was going to lead to their demise. Okay, that's where we are right now. I firmly believe that, and that's the only reason why I'm running for the board this year. It is the only reason, because I think that time is absolutely critically now. So we got to make decisions and make good decisions, and part of that is who we're going to put on the board of directors to represent us. So why new yeast? Why do I call it that? Well, any baker knows that there's time where you got to throw out the old yeast and get new yeast and use it if you want to bake a better loaf of bread. What was okay for us in years past is no longer okay for us, not if we're going to accomplish great things together as a community. So it's time to get rid of the old way of thinking and our old expectations. It's time for us to set new expectations, take new actions. And that's where, if you want to make a better loaf of bread, that's what you got to do, freshen the yeast. So can we get there? Absolutely. I'm 100% confident in it. But we as a community need to make that decision. Yeah, you know what? It's time. So let's get to work.